The first sound was the monitor screaming flat and endless, the kind that makes people step back and decide someone is already lost. They dragged him in without a name, without a wallet, rain still dripping off his boots, blood soaking the gurney as if the floor itself were bleeding. Jack Turner looked less like a patient and more like a problem no one wanted. Security tightened the straps. He snapped one clean plastic cracking like bone. "He's psychotic," Dr. Ryan Caldwell said. "Too fast, too loud, already reaching for a syringe." "Sedate him." Jack's eyes weren't wild. They were working, counting vents, measuring distance. His breath came short, controlled, as if he were pacing himself for something worse than pain. An orderly leaned in. Jack shifted his hips and sent the man skidding into a metal cart. The room froze. Someone whispered, "Call the police." Evelyn Brooks stood at the doorway. 41, quiet, watching the hands. Not flailing, searching. She felt the old chill rise up her spine. This wasn't madness. This was training. And if they kept treating him like a monster, someone in this room was going to die. Dr. Caldwell took a step back, jaw tight, pride bruised in front of his staff. "Restrain him now," he ordered, voice sharp with panic disguised as authority. 2 guards rushed in, boots squeaking on wet tile. Jack turned his head slowly, tracking them before they moved. When they grabbed his arms, he dropped his weight, twisted, and the taller guard cried out as his wrist bent the wrong way. The sound cut through the room, a dull, wet snap. Nurses recoiled. A young resident stared, mouth open, hands useless at his sides. Jack's breathing changed, slower, deeper. He scanned the ceiling, the exits, the glass. "Perimeter breached," he muttered, words slurred but precise. "Need extraction." Caldwell scoffed. "He's hallucinating," he said, reaching again for the syringe. Evelyn stepped forward before she realized her feet were moving. "Doctor," she said, calm but firm. The kind of calm that comes from standing in worse rooms than this. "You're cornering him." Caldwell shot her a look, irritated. "Nurse Brooks, unless you have a medical degree you haven't mentioned, grab a limb or get out." Jack's eyes flicked to her face. Just for a second. In that instant, Evelyn saw it clearly. Not rage, not insanity. Fear sharpened into purpose, and the clock started ticking faster. The guard staggered back, clutching his wrist, and in that opening Jack moved, not wild, efficient. He reached the counter, fingers closing around trauma shears, steel flashing under fluorescent light. He backed into the corner, blade reversed along his forearm, stance low and balanced. The room emptied itself in half a breath. Someone dropped a clipboard. Someone else whispered, "Jesus!" Caldwell went pale. "Code Silver," he barked, voice cracking as he fumbled for the wall button. "Armed patient." Jack lifted his eyes, steady, terrifyingly clear. "Back up," he said, almost gentle. "You cross the line. I sever the artery." 90 seconds. His chest rose and fell, blood soaking through his shirt, but his hand didn't shake. Evelyn saw the ink then, half hidden by red. a symbol she hadn't seen since another life. Her stomach tightened. The air felt thin. Police sirens grew louder outside. Caldwell swallowed, hands raised, trying to sound brave. "You're dying," he said. "You need surgery." Jack didn't look at him. He watched the vents, the doors, the glass. Evelyn stepped closer, palms open, heart hammering. "You're not here anymore," she said softly. Jack's jaw clenched. For the first time, doubt flickered across his face. The sirens bled through the walls now, rising and falling like a warning meant for everyone in the room. Jack's grip tightened on the shears. His eyes tracked the red light washing across the floor, the shadows moving where people shifted their weight. "Hostiles inbound," he said, breath hitching. "I can't be captured." Caldwell tried to speak, failed, wiped sweat from his lip with the back of his hand. The youngest nurse was crying, silent tears sliding down her face as she pressed herself against the oxygen tanks. Evelyn took another step. Slow, deliberate. "Jack," she said, testing the name like a bridge across a gap. His head snapped toward her. The blade lifted an inch. "Don't," he warned. She didn't stop. She saw the veins in his neck stand out, the tremor in his knees he was fighting to hide. "Look at me," she said. "You're in a hospital." Seattle. Not a kill zone. Jack shook his head hard, as if clearing static. "No," he whispered. Seattle's compromised. His eyes burned, blue and terrified. And for the first time, Evelyn saw how young he really was under the scars. The doors rattled. Someone shouted outside. Time collapsed into a single breath, and Evelyn knew the next move would decide who walked out alive. Jack shifted his weight, calculating, already preparing to move. Evelyn saw it in his shoulders, the way his heels angled toward the door. He was about to charge. "If you wanted us dead," she said quickly, voice steady but urgent, "we would already be dead." The words landed, not loud, precise. Jack froze, breath stuttering. His eyes searched her face like he was looking for a map. "You're waiting," she continued, taking another careful step. For a signal. For permission. His hand trembled for the first time. "Protocol 7, he whispered. "Broken arrow." The room went still. Evelyn felt the phrase hit her chest like a fist. Broken arrow wasn't retreat. It was annihilation. A last call to erase yourself before capture. Outside, a police megaphone barked orders. "Drop the weapon. Come out now." Jack swallowed, jaw tight. "They're coming in," he said. The shears lifted. Evelyn didn't think. She moved into his space, eyes locked on his. "They aren't hostiles," she said, "and you are not alone." His breath shuddered. The blade dipped. Just an inch. Enough to change everything. Evelyn's gaze dropped to his forearm, to the ink smeared with blood, and her breath caught before she could stop it. The symbol wasn't just familiar. It was impossible. Her brother had sketched it once on the back of an envelope years ago from a place he wasn't allowed to name. Jack followed her eyes, misreading the silence, shoulders tensing again. "Don't look at that," he snapped. You don't know what it means." "I do," Evelyn said quietly. His head tilted, confused, wary. The alarms faded into a dull roar behind her ears as memory surged forward. "I was taught the language," she went on, "by someone who never came home." Jack's breathing faltered. What was his call sign? He asked, testing her, blade still ready. Evelyn didn't answer right away. She stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of red in his eyelashes. "You're drifting left," she said instead, voice firm, measured. "Correct your stance." Jack obeyed before he realized he was doing it. His eyes widened. Recognition hit him like a blow. The shears sagged in his hand. "Spotter," he whispered. Evelyn nodded once. "Stand down," she said. And for the first time, Jack hesitated. The door burst inward without warning, boots thundering, voices shouting over each other. "Police! Drop it now!" Red dots bloomed across Jack's chest, across Evelyn's back. The fragile stillness shattered. Jack recoiled, instinct snapping him back into the fight. He lunged, fast and desperate, moving like a man who had already decided how this ended. "No!" Evelyn shouted, throwing herself forward. She slammed into his wounded side, arms locking around his waist as they hit the floor hard. The impact knocked the breath from both of them. Gunfire didn't come. Not yet. Jack thrashed, strength surging, his elbow drawing back for a strike that would have crushed bone. Evelyn pressed her mouth to his ear and screamed the words she had sworn she'd never say again. Whiskey, tango, foxtrot, 4-9er. The sound cut through him like a blade. Jack froze mid-motion, arm suspended in the air. His breath broke. "Sierra 1, he rasped. Evelyn held him tighter, tears burning. "This is Sierra 2, she whispered. "Verify signal." The shears slipped from his fingers. His body went slack all at once, the fight draining out of him as blood pooled beneath them and the room rushed back in. "Crash cart now!" Evelyn shouted as Jack's weight sagged fully into her arms. The police lowered their weapons, confusion rippling through them as blood spread across the tile in a dark, widening pool. Caldwell stood frozen, mouth open, watching the patient he had written off slip past the point of control. "He's bleeding out," Evelyn said, voice sharp, already pressing her hands into Jack's abdomen. "If you want him alive, move." Someone finally did. Wheels screeched. Gloves snapped on. Jack's eyes fluttered, unfocused, the fight gone. His grip found Evelyn's sleeve, weak, almost apologetic. "Signal verified," he murmured. Then nothing. The monitor screamed again. Not flat this time, but fast, chaotic. They rushed him down the hall, lights streaking overhead like passing tracer fire. Hours later, the storm outside still battered the windows, but the war had moved into the ICU. Jack lay intubated, restrained with steel cuffs instead of leather. 2 military police stood guard outside the glass, rifles slung, faces blank. Evelyn sat alone in the break room, hands shaking around cold coffee, realizing the truth settling in her bones. She hadn't just saved a patient. She had stepped into something that did not want witnesses. The men in uniform arrived without sirens, without names, moving through the ICU like they already owned the air. They didn't ask for charts. They didn't introduce themselves. One of them handed Caldwell a folded paper and watched his confidence collapse as he read it. "This patient is classified," the man said calmly. "All records stop here." Monitors were unplugged from the network. Security footage blinked out, one camera at a time. A nurse tried to protest and was met with a look that ended the conversation. Evelyn watched from the hall as they adjusted Jack's restraints, heavier now, steel biting into the rails. He looked smaller under sedation, younger, the violence stripped away. An MP noticed her and stepped into her path. "You're done," he said. "He's being transferred as soon as he's stable." "Transferred where?" Evelyn asked. The man's mouth didn't move when he answered. "Somewhere he can't talk." That night, Evelyn didn't go home. She sat in her car, rain drumming on the roof, replaying every second. The symbol, the code, the way Jack had reacted to her voice. Someone had already decided his story, and it wasn't the truth. Evelyn noticed it just after midnight, when the ICU quieted enough for small details to matter. The drip above Jack's bed looked wrong. Not the label. The line. She stepped closer, heart slowing the way it always did before something bad happened. There was a pinprick in the tubing. Fresh, deliberate. Her fingers followed the line to the bag. The fluid wasn't clear. It carried a faint, milky swirl that had no business being there. Potassium. Her stomach dropped. Jack stirred, eyes fluttering beneath sedation, his heart rate creeping higher on the monitor. Someone had decided not to wait for an interrogation. They were going to let him die quietly and call it natural. An MP shifted at the door. "What are you doing?" he asked, suspicious. "He's crashing," Evelyn snapped, already reaching for the line. The monitor alarm climbed in pitch, sharp and accusing. She ripped the IV free, blood splashing onto the sheet. "Code blue," she yelled, louder than she'd ever yelled in her life. "Get the cart." As chaos erupted, Evelyn grabbed the poisoned bag and slid it under her scrub top, her pulse pounding. She knew then there was no middle ground left. Jack wasn't just a patient anymore. He was a target. And if she hesitated, he would be dead before morning. The alarms screamed loud enough to draw every eye, and that was exactly what Evelyn needed. The MPs backed off instinctively, hands on radios, soldiers uncomfortable in a medical storm they didn't understand. Evelyn moved fast, decisive, her hands no longer shaking. She tore the tape from Jack's breathing tube, ignoring the burn in her throat as she leaned close. "Wake up!" she hissed. The tube slid free with a wet sound. Jack convulsed, coughing hard, dragging air like it hurt. "Quiet," she ordered, pressing her palm over his mouth. "If you fight me, we're done." His eyes focused on hers, pain and recognition cutting through the haze. She snapped a lab coat around his shoulders, shoved a cap onto his head. "Can you walk?" He nodded, barely. They moved when the crash team flooded the hall. Evelyn pushed the empty gurney straight into their path, blocking sight lines, then dragged Jack toward the service elevator, the one that smelled like bleach and old linen. The doors slid shut just as Caldwell rounded the corner, eyes wide, flanked by men in dark suits who did not belong to the hospital. The elevator dropped. Evelyn exhaled once. Not relief, resolve. The basement air was colder, heavier, thick with the smell of disinfectant and metal. Jack sagged against the wall as the elevator opened, his color gone, blood seeping through the borrowed coat. "Loading dock," he rasped, voice shredded. Evelyn shook her head once. "Too clean," she said, already steering him the other way. They moved past pathology, past stainless steel doors and humming freezers, into a prep room where the lights buzzed low and tired. "Get on," she ordered, pushing a gurney forward. Jack stared at it, then understood. He climbed onto the steel tray, shivering as the cold bit into his bones. Evelyn pulled a white sheet over him, covering his face, her hands steady despite the thunder in her chest. She pushed the gurney down the hall like she'd done 100 times before. At the loading bay, a new security guard stood up, suspicious. "What's this?" he asked. "Overflow," Evelyn snapped, exhausted and fierce. "You want to check him?" She lifted the corner of the sheet, just enough for the smell of blood to hit. The guard grimaced and waved her through. Rain slapped the concrete outside. Evelyn pushed harder, the storm swallowing them as they disappeared into the night. They didn't breathe until the car doors slammed shut and the hospital fell behind them in the mirror. Rain blurred the streetlights into long white streaks as Evelyn drove with both hands locked on the wheel, knuckles pale. Jack lay reclined under a blanket, jaw clenched, teeth chattering hard enough to shake the seat. "We're clear," she said, forcing the words to sound true. Jack's eyes flicked to the side mirror. "No," he whispered, "we're not." His hand fumbled toward the dash. "They'll track you. Modern cars talk." Evelyn shook her head. "I don't have a tracker." Jack dragged himself upright with a sound halfway between a growl and a gasp. "Pull over. Now." The car swerved onto the shoulder, tires screaming. Jack was out before it fully stopped, dropping into the mud, crawling under the rear bumper. Metal cracked. Wires tore free. He rolled back out, rain plastering his hair to his face, holding a small black box. "They were letting us run," he said, breath ragged. "Hunting." Evelyn stared at the device in his hand, the truth sinking deep and cold. This wasn't an escape. It was the opening move of a much bigger fight. Dawn found them hours north, tucked into a bend of river and pine where cell service died and the world went quiet. The cabin waited like it always had, wood dark with age, windows blind, the smell of cold ash and sap thick in the air. Evelyn dragged Jack inside and lowered him onto the couch as if he were made of glass. He was shaking now, the adrenaline burned off, pain finally collecting its debt. She cleaned his wounds with what she had, hands moving on instinct, voice low and steady, while his jaw clenched to keep from crying out. When the worst was done, Jack reached into his pocket and pressed his palm open. Numbers were carved into his skin, raw and angry. Coordinates, beneath them, a name. Evelyn's breath broke. Her brother's name. He didn't kill him, Jack said, hoarse. He carried him. The cabin shuddered suddenly, glass rattling in the frames. Headlights cut through the trees. Engines. Not one. Several. Jack pushed himself upright, eyes hard again. "They found us," he said, and somewhere deep in Evelyn's chest, fear gave way to something sharper. Resolve. The night burned itself out in fire and noise, and by morning the river ran calm again, carrying secrets the way it always had. Jack survived, not because of orders or weapons or rank, but because one person refused to look away when everyone else chose fear. The men who hunted him vanished back into paperwork and silence, their names scrubbed clean, their story rewritten for public comfort. Evelyn returned to the hospital weeks later, walking the same halls, wearing the same scrubs. But the way people looked at her had changed. Quiet was no longer invisible. It was respected. Jack healed slowly, scars knitting into scars, the war finally losing its grip on his eyes. He learned how to breathe without listening for boots in the dark. Somewhere beyond reach, the truth moved forward, fragile but alive, carried by people who remembered. This story isn't about violence. It's about recognition, about what happens when humanity interrupts power. If this story stayed with you, take a second to like the video, subscribe for more stories like this, and comment 3 words below. Never look away.